Get your man on your back. Where's the kitty? Yeah, we're trying to go
He was fighting her like a man. Get off her, tell him get off of her neck. Get off of her neck.
He's holding her neck down.
He can snap her neck and kill her. He can kill her. Tell him get off of her neck. Get off of her neck. I don't care. Get off her neck. Get off of her neck. Kill yourself, girl. Kill him. This don't make any sense. Get off of her neck.
Panthers, get it! Yeah, the Panthers for a long time. Find out.
Get off of her neck.
Okay, let me get, okay. Come on now.
Umbrella. She's up. Whole nother level of shit you can't even understand.
What is good, my people? We are live, back again with another episode of The Forecast. Now, to be honest, there are times I feel like the only thing that can help our community is total destruction. But we have to realize we have already been completely destroyed. Our minds have been destroyed. Our history, our legacy, everything has been destroyed already. Now, the only difference is today we have the illusion of inclusion. And it seems impossible that our people will ever get on the same page. We don't even realize we're not as divided as we think we are. Generations before us came together and did what they had to do. The civil rights movement, they put their feelings aside, they put their beliefs aside and did what they had to do. Black men and black women unified in one cause. Before that, in the 1900s, the 1920s, 1930s, we built great communities, successful, wealthy communities, because they had no other choice but to stick together. They faced so much hatred that they didn't even accept black people's money back then. So they had to spend money with themselves. There were black Wall Streets all over the country. The difference between us and them is they knew what the deal was. And honestly, that's one of the best things about Trump being elected. Now we have no other choice but to wake up and do what we gotta do. He makes it easy to see what the deal really is. But for the entire history of this country, for the last 400 years, it has always been this way. So now to stop the opioid epidemic that's going on in America right now, now Donald Trump wants to call for the death penalty for drug dealers.
Every day, 116 Americans die from an opioid-related overdose. In New Hampshire, the overdose really death rate. I mean, can you believe this? The death rate is double the national average. It's got difficulties like people wouldn't believe. Defeating this epidemic will require the commitment of every state, local, and federal agency. Failure is not an option. Addiction is not our future. We will liberate our country from this crisis. Never been like this. hundreds of years, never been like this. And we will raise a drug-free generation of American children. Last October, we declared the opioid crisis a public health emergency. Should have been done a long time before. Since then, we've worked with Congress to ensure at least $6 billion additional dollars going through right now in new funding in 2018 and 2019 to combat the opioid crisis, and we will be spending the most money ever on the opioid crisis. On our most recent National Prescription Drug Take-Back Day, people across the country turned in more than 900,000 pounds of unused or expired prescription drugs, more than the weight of 3 Boeing 757s. Here in New Hampshire, I applaud all of the drug enforcement agents and law enforcement officers who recently coordinated Operation Granite Shield, an 18-hour enforcement action targeting drug traffickers that resulted in the arrest of 151 people. These are terrible people, and we have to get tough on those people, because we can have all the blue ribbon committees we want, but if we don't get tough on the drug dealers, we're wasting our time. Just remember that. We're wasting our time. And that toughness includes the death penalty. You know, it's an amazing thing. Some of these drug dealers will kill thousands of people during their lifetime. Thousands of people. And destroy many more lives than that. But they will kill thousands of people during their lifetime. And they'll get caught, and they'll get 30 days in jail. Or they'll go away for a year. Or they'll be fined. And yet if you kill one person, you get the death penalty or you go to jail for life. So if we're not going to get tough on the drug dealers who kill thousands of people and destroy so many people's lives, we are just doing the wrong thing. We have got to get tough. This isn't about nice anymore. This isn't about committees. This isn't about let's get everybody and have dinners and let's have everybody go to a blue ribbon committee and everybody gets a medal for frankly talking and doing nothing. This is about winning a very, very tough problem. And if we don't get very tough on these dealers, it's not going to happen, folks. It's not going to happen. And it's not that we have a choice. We don't have a choice. We can be nice and we can be soft and weak, and you're not going to have a country left. So we have to strengthen up our laws so that we can do what we have to do. We have to stop this from happening. Drug traffickers kill so many thousands of our citizens every year, and that's why my Department of Justice will be seeking so many much tougher penalties than we've ever had, and we will be focusing on the penalty that I talked about previously for the big pushers, the ones that are really killing so many people, and that penalty is going to be the death penalty. We got to be tough. We have to be smart. We have to change the laws, and we're working on that right now. The Department of Justice is working very, very hard on that. But the ultimate penalty has to be the death penalty. Now, maybe our country's not ready for that. It's possible. It's possible that our country's not ready for that. And I can understand it, maybe. Although personally, I can't understand that. But there are people that are good people, that are strong, smart people, and they would differ with most of us. But I think unless you do that, unless you have really, really powerful penalties led by the death penalty for the really bad pushers and abusers, we are going to get nowhere.
So to solve the opioid epidemic going on in New Hampshire and West Virginia and all across America, he wants to use the death penalty. Now, I'm sure the first person that'll receive the death penalty will be some pharmaceutical CEO or something. Trump just announced 4 nominees for the U.S. Sentencing Commission. And one of the judges he nominated was a man named Bill Otis. Now, of course, this man, Bill Otis, passionately defends the same law and order policies that created our current mass incarceration system, where black people, specifically black men, are disproportionately locked up more than anybody.
While all the chaos happens around the Trump administration, he is sneaking in some loathsome people into the government. And I want to tell you about one of them today. It's William Otis. So let me go to Kimberly Yam's report at HuffPost. She explains that William Otis, adjunct professor at Georgetown Law School and former member of the Bush administration, was announced as one of President Donald Trump's nominees. And this is important, for the U.S. Sentencing Commission, a bipartisan agency that dictates federal sentencing guidelines earlier this month. So earlier this month, he tries to sneak this Otis guy in. So why sneak him in? Why? What's his positions? What does he think? He worked for a former administration. He's a Georgetown law professor. Must be a respectable guy, right? Wait till you get a load of Otis. In a 2013 post, he wrote for blog Crime and Consequences. Otis indicated he agreed with the judge's remarks that, quote, blacks and Hispanics are more violent than whites. We're still having a conversation. That guy's going to be in charge of federal sentencing guidelines. And later they'll tell us there's no systemic racism. The guy literally said blacks and Hispanics are more violent than whites.
Now, this man is a teacher at Georgetown Law Center, and he advocates incessantly for lengthy prison sentences. And just like this pseudoscience these white men are always trying to push and never have any evidence to back up what they say, he claims these drug laws lead to a decline in the crime rate, which is kind of crazy because if you're creating a crime to arrest somebody, wouldn't that make the crime rate go up? But like much of the pseudoscience that they push out there, these things are easily debunked. This man, Bill Otis, said, to avoid longer sentences, criminals should consider quitting the smack business and get a normal job like everybody else. This man calls Black Lives Matter, as well as any intellectuals or academics who support it. He said they are the America Stinks crowd and blames them for a cultural rot impersonating advanced thinking. This man is talking about advanced thinking while he said that blacks and Latinos are more violent than white people. But we aren't the ones that tried to commit genocide on like 5 groups of people or drop nuclear bombs on anybody. But they have always called us the violent ones. During slavery, they called us the violent ones. They said we were crazy if we wanted to run away. And they were taming savages. They've been saying these kind of things for so long, they really believe it themselves. But the truth is, if we were as violent as they say we were, we wouldn't be in this situation in the first place. And while they call us violent, they are on the attack right now. They are using white terrorism right now to start war. And this isn't starting war, because we have to realize we've been in war for the last 400 years. This ain't new. But right now, they are taking off their masks and going in to attack. All these bombs in Texas, but they can't seem to figure out where this is coming from. They can ban Muslim and African countries, but they can't do anything about this particular problem. All these school shootings going on right now. There was another high school in Maryland that just got shot up, but we're still under the illusion of inclusion. They are willing to have a civil war right now. Now, the thing is, it's hard to attack specifically black communities because of integration. There aren't no wealthy black communities like there used to be for them to burn down. And when these trolls online try to threaten you and talk about genocide, they're not joking. They're dead serious. But the thing is, they are harming each other more than anything. But the purpose is a play for power. They feel threatened. They feel like they're about to be out of power. And they are. But the point is, they respond with urgency. Now, I don't know how many times I can say we are all we got, but it's the truth. And it shouldn't take them getting violent, and it shouldn't take for it to be this much in our face for us to do something about it. We've been at war. We don't control our own food sources. We don't control our educational systems. We don't control our children's mind. Whenever we try to build an economy, it's been destroyed over and over again. It's not an accident that the mental health in the black community is what it is. Heart diseases that we shouldn't even have is the #1 killer of black women, of black people at a younger age. All because we don't even control what kind of food we have access to, and a lack of education about what food we should be eating. We have always been in a war. Maybe now that they're not hiding their hand anymore, we'll realize what's going on, and we will put aside our tribal differences and do what we gotta do.
A federal judgeship is a lifetime appointment, and President Reagan has been nominating young men for these jobs, 32 to 38 years old. People who could keep the Reagan influence around for a long time. However, one of Mr. Reagan's nominees is in trouble in Washington, in trouble for saying that the NAACP is a pinko organization, and that a white civil rights attorney from his home state of Alabama is a disgrace to his race. NBC News national political correspondent Ken Bodie is in our Washington studio this morning with more on that nomination. Morning, Ken.
Morning, Jane. The man who said those things and who would be a federal judge is Jeff Sessions. Part of the story of the struggle over Sessions' nomination takes place right here in Washington, in the Senate. And part takes place in the Black Belt of Alabama, where Sessions was born and where the struggle for black voting rights was waged. Let's take a look at both places.
Mr. Sessions is a throwback to a shameful era, which I know both black and white Americans thought was in our past. It's inconceivable to me that a person of this attitude is qualified to be a U.S. attorney, let alone a United States federal judge.
Jefferson Beauregard Sessions III. He was brought face to face with things he personally had said. For example, that the NAACP and the Civil Liberties Union are un-American organizations.
These comments that you could say about a commie organization or something, I may have said something like that in a general way that probably was wrong.
Also brought face to face with a Justice Department civil rights attorney who knows him well and who was asked, is Sessions a racist?
I don't really know whether he is or he isn't. I probably ought to know, but I don't. I really can't say.
But the would-be judge's biggest problem came in a case he prosecuted and lost, a vote fraud case involving black civil rights leaders in Perry County, Alabama. Defendants in the Perry County case were Albert and Evelyn Turner, political and civil rights leaders for more than 20 years. Albert was an aide to Martin Luther King. Their scrapbook has all the marches.
This is Bloody Sunday. Albert conceived, that's him right there.
Albert Turner guided the mules at Dr. King's funeral. The federal government charged the Turners with doctoring absentee ballots, vote fraud, and mail fraud.
My own opinion is that the case was political. I actually don't think Jeff Sessions came in with an ounce of evidence.
Blacks charge harassment by U.S. Attorney Jeff Sessions, noting there was no investigation of white vote fraud. The Justice Department says it had no complaints about white vote fraud. Jack Drake, a Tuscaloosa civil rights attorney, says the feds might have found plenty of white vote fraud had they looked for it.
I've seen letters written by the concerned citizens of Sumter County, for example, saying, we know you don't live here anymore, but we want you to vote here.
The case was tried last summer. Albert and Evelyn Turner were found not guilty. Jeff Sessions declined to talk to NBC News, but his friends and supporters told us he is not a racist, and the Justice Department says Sessions had a good case. Jack Drake disagrees.
I didn't think the government had a case. The impetus of it, I think, was to keep blacks from voting, to intimidate people, and they went right after the leadership that they want to defeat.
Albert Turner does not want Jeff Sessions on the federal bench.
A man like Jeff Sessions will be there for such a long period of time, and I honestly think that he will be in the way of progress in this area for quite a while.
He is, I believe, a disgrace to the Justice Department, and he should withdraw his nomination and resign his position.
The discussion of Jeff Sessions' nomination is not over, but my sense, from what I heard in the Senate last week, is that if President Reagan really wants Jeff Sessions on the federal bench, he is in for a fight.
Good evening, I'm Clarice Tinsley. A Dallas County election judge was removed from his position after a racist post was discovered on his Facebook page. 43-year-old Randy Smith worked as a Democratic election judge for nearly 20 years. He supervised voting at a polling place on Election Day. Today, he was confronted by the county commissioners about the comments he made July 2015 that have since been removed. Deanne Anglin is first on Fox 4 News.
Well, the code of conduct for Dallas County's election judges includes a list of standards, including moral and ethical obligations. The one highlighted here applies in this case to treat others with respect. Dallas County elections judge Randy Smith stepped forward to face off with county commissioners over racially charged comments he posted on Facebook in 2015.
Well, what did you say? So just be direct so the record will be clear.
I don't even remember. I live it honestly. So.
Okay, you're joking, right?
No, I'm serious. I don't remember everything, honestly.
One of the posts, why do people post so much crap on racial slur when 3 years ago I was stabbed and almost lost my life because of one? I know there are some good blacks, no offense to them. The county commission allowed Smith 5 minutes to address the matter. He did not deny penning the post.
I was wrong, but I have deleted the account, and I am aware now of what I did wrong. So I'm asking for some lenience or like a suspension.
The commission voted to remove Smith from his duties. Meantime, elections administrator Tony Pippins-Poole explains an elections judge is appointed by the political party, and the commission approves or rejects that appointment. She says their role is to oversee all aspects of a specific polling place, and a moral responsibility of the elections judge requires them to treat others with respect.
We let them know this is what is expected of them. These are the calls that you can be removed from. So we give that to every judge at the beginning of their terms. So they are quite aware of what the Commissioners Court really expects of the judges in Dallas County.
The Dallas County Democratic Party, which appointed Smith, issued a statement today regarding the matter. It says, Randy Smith is not someone we want representing our party.
Just days after a Como 4 investigation on Seattle police featured 2 young African-American men, those men say SPD officers pulled them over at gunpoint. Was it coincidence or retaliation? That is the question the local NAACP once answered. Como 4's Tracy Vetter brought you our original investigation and is now live in the newsroom with the very latest. Tracy.
Joshua Lawson and Christopher Franklin couldn't believe it the first time Seattle cops pulled them over at gunpoint, but for it to happen a second time, well, they have questions, a lot of questions, but say they can't get any answers from Seattle police. This November 2010 dash cam video shows police arresting Lawson and Franklin for assault, and the startling words of the officer after taking Franklin back to the jail.
No, you're going to jail for robbery, that's all. Robbery. I'm going to make stuff up. Robbery. Here on out.
During our investigation, Seattle police said the comment was inappropriate but just banter, and added the victim had identified the 2 at the scene. But in an earlier 911 call,
he didn't get a good look at the other guy.
The victim said he didn't get a good look, and the booking photos don't match the description of both assailants wearing jeans. Lawson and Franklin were ultimately released and never charged, but 6 days after our story aired in February,
these young people were pulled over again at gunpoint, cars searched, harassed and humiliated.
The details are slim. Lawson was reportedly driving a car registered to him with Franklin and 3 other friends and relatives inside. Both men say 10 to 12 police handcuffed all 5.
It was unreal. It was frightening.
After more than an hour, the police released them. No tickets, no charges. They've asked SPD for videos and reports from that night, but say they've received nothing. And after trying to get public records from SPD the first time around, around. This time they're not waiting.
And it wasn't until Como 4 News put their weight behind us and we started interacting directly with one of the city attorneys that all of a sudden we were getting things that when I did the initial request we weren't getting.
The men and their lawyers say without the police records this time, they can't tell if the police were malicious or just doing their job.
It was either a horrible coincidence or, it was a horrible retaliation.
The Seattle police are declining to comment as the two men have filed a claim connected to that earlier stop. But late today, the police sent me this street check report, which they shows proper police procedure was used. Lawson, Franklin, and their attorneys are just getting this report now and trying to figure out what it might mean.
Chances are you may never have heard of a 3%er, and that's okay by them. They're a relatively new kind of militia group. They claim to have some 400 members in Minnesota, and they've divided the state up into 7 zones in a kind of command control structure. They say they're ready to defend us in a coming civil war. The question is, who exactly do they plan on fighting?
They've always hidden in plain sight. Those who believe one day our government will go too far.
Are you still a member? I have no comment about that on camera. No comment?
A world where grievances and guns
We will defend ourselves.
go hand in hand.
If there's no firearm serial number on there, it's untraceable.
Joshua Rader is a commanding officer in the United Patriots of Minnesota 3%, and one of the few willing to talk about the movement publicly.
Everybody told me not to do this interview.
But even he doesn't trust us. His brother will videotape our interview.
What does the group stand for? Group stands for pretty much protecting our community, protecting our gun rights, protect the Second Amendment, Constitution. Pretty straightforward stuff that you're used to hearing from patriot groups, I guess.
The name 3%ers comes from the American Revolution, a belief long disputed that only 3% of the colonists took up arms against England. The 3%ers share ideological DNA with other right-wing extremist groups like the Posse Comitatus, the Oath Keepers, and Sovereign Citizens, and especially the militia and patriot movements of the last 20 years. 3%ers have also become very social media savvy, spreading their message and sharing pictures on Facebook.
We have patriots out here from Wisconsin, Minnesota, Montana, Arizona, Utah, Nebraska, Kansas. They're from all over the place.
3%ers have regular training exercises around the country, like this one in Colorado. Preparations, they say, for natural disasters, a terror attack, or if everything just goes to hell.
I think their country is possibly headed in the direction of a civil war. The rap on patriot groups is that you're all a bunch of racists. I completely disagree with the white supremacist movement. I also disagree with the black supremacist movement.
According to a previously sealed search warrant in the case, the FBI considers the Minnesota 3%ers a militia group which believes in the violent resistance to or intended overthrow of the U.S. government. Unknown to the Minnesota 3%ers, the FBI flipped one of their members who became a paid confidential informant, telling the FBI the group was involved in manufacturing untraceable assault rifles, buying them in pieces, what's known as an 80% lower.
The reality of it is it can be done relatively easy.
The ATF, which is not involved in this investigation, showed us how someone can take a raw hunk of metal, drill it out, add a bolt, a hammer, a firing mechanism, and turn it into the receiver of an AR-15.
This piece is not even a firearm at this point.
Correct.
But you mill out this piece, and then you get this.
Right.
And now you have a firearm.
And because that lower part of the AR-15 is homemade, there is no serial number.
But how traceable are these weapons if they don't have a serial number?
If there's no firearm serial number on there, it's untraceable.
The FBI says a member wrote to Thomas, if I can produce 80% lowers into a full weapon for $400 or $500, maybe we could hook up the loyal members.
All right, and we back on the forecast. Now, we are at another crossroad in American history right now. Now, we generally agree on a lot of the core issues. But the thing is, we don't have to reinvent the wheel over again. Even just in our history here in America, there are plenty of examples. Our ancestors left us the blueprint. Like with economics, regardless of our beliefs, we practiced group economics and was successful because we had no other choice. Segregation forced them to be millionaires. They didn't have to be encouraged to support black businesses because they had no other choice but to support black businesses. Now, we still don't have a choice. We just think we do. Now, these prosperous black cities were destroyed because they did not learn how to protect themselves. They came in, robbing, killing, looting, burning the whole city to the ground. And whatever cities they didn't burn to the ground, they just built a highway right through the middle of it. Now, of course, we can easily blame ourselves today and call each other lazy and say we don't support each other. But for people who have had our history taken away from us, I don't think we should take the history that we do have out of context. It wasn't that long ago. That was our grandmother's generation. They supported each other because they had to. And we have to right now. And right now, we could easily start practicing group economics. We give so much money away anyway. We could create a board of successful black business people strictly to run and help grow black businesses. We can nominate the most successful black business people to be in charge of the organization. Now, make sure that they stay transparent. Make sure they tell you what they're going to do, and you make sure they follow through with it. If they don't do that, stop sending your money right away. But we can all easily support that. Send $5, $10, $100, $1,000, whatever you have. And then we'll be able to put black businesses that already exist into black communities so we can support it. Or if somebody has a business idea, we don't have to go to somebody else to get a loan. We have an organization there to help him build and grow his business. And when we start building economic institutions, that'll help us build other institutions that we need. That'll help us build institutions to educate our children. Because not only are we sending our kids to their schools to learn that Christopher Columbus discovered America, now they might get shot up while they're doing it. When we have an economy, we'll be able to build institutions in order to protect us. Now, just like every other organization that's been created in order to help protect us, that will be criminalized. But they have always criminalized us.
Very few will likely be surprised by the findings of the ACLU report. The organization tracked 10 years of arrest records in 4 New Jersey towns. The study concentrated on arrests for minor offenses in 4 categories: marijuana possession, disorderly conduct, loitering, and defiant trespass.
We thought that this would be a good way to get a sense of how policing is done in neighborhoods within cities. And what we saw is that in the Black and Latino neighborhoods of particular cities, there is a much more aggressive enforcement of low-level offenses.
Resulting, says Ofer, in the perpetrators having criminal records, affecting their ability to get a job, stay in public housing, or even in some cases stay in the country. All the result of a reliance on the broken window theory of policing, which says focusing on minor offenses keeps potential major offenses from happening. The study's findings are stark. In Jersey City, blacks were 5 times and Latinos twice as likely to be arrested as whites. In Elizabeth and New Brunswick, blacks were just over 3 times as likely. In Millville, the number jumps to 6 times for blacks and 3 times for Latinos.
One of the problems that the ACLU study found was that some towns, Elizabeth particularly, didn't even track arrests for Latinos.
Which, says Ofer, reduces racial disparity records because Latinos are generally categorized then as white. One of the cities in the study that is struggling with these statistics is Jersey City, where Public Safety Director James Shea says striking a balance between checking minor offenses and concentrating on major crimes is a big part of daily police strategy.
Quite a few members of the community brought up that our police officers, while present and visible, were not engaging in these type of arrests, which they felt would break up the crowds of young people, would eliminate unsightly groups, would stop low-level marijuana smoking. This is a conversation and a challenge for policing across the United States now.
Shea, a former NYPD deputy commissioner, says he's seen broken windows work, but the price police pay in community mistrust and political fallout is too high.
To be honest, we police might have been a little tone deaf to the community and probably should have been on it a little earlier. But we've de-emphasized that type of enforcement completely. And I mean, I think if you see, New York has also, you're seeing conversations around the country about communities not being willing to tolerate that type of enforcement.
The 105-page report makes several recommendations to the Attorney General's office. Among them, demand good data management from all cities, tracking police practices, including stop and frisk, investigate other cities to see what the data there say, and de-emphasizing low-level offenses. The communities were reluctant to talk about the report, and the Attorney General's office says it's reviewing the report and the data. Everyone seemingly in agreement that police-community relations need a reset, just not all on the same page about how to get there.
When you look at groups like the Black Panthers, they try to put them on the level as the KKK, but the Ku Klux Klan is still around today. The Black Panthers were infiltrated by the FBI. The FBI is infiltrated by KKK. The Black Panthers were born out of the civil rights movement, which they also criminalized. All the Black Panthers were doing was trying to protect the community. They were trying to feed and educate children. They were teaching people about their Second Amendment rights. And as much as they talk about gun reform laws now, that was the easiest they ever got gun laws passed. But they labeled the Black Panthers terrorists and they destroyed them. And then the Crips were born from the Black Panthers, and their main goal was to protect the neighborhood. But by then, the war on poverty and the war on drugs had started taking effect on the black community.
And this administration today, here and now, declares unconditional war on poverty in America. And I urge this Congress and all Americans to join with me in that effort. It will not be a short or easy struggle. No single weapon or strategy will suffice. But we shall not rest until that war is won. The richest nation on earth can afford to win it. We cannot afford to lose it. $1,000 invested in salvaging an unemployable youth today can return $40,000 or more in his lifetime. Poverty is a national problem requiring improved national organization and support. But this attack, to be effective, must also be organized at the state and the local level and must be supported and directed by state and local efforts. For the war against poverty will not be won here in Washington. It must be won in the field, in every private home, in every public office, from the courthouse to the White House. The program I shall propose will emphasize this cooperative approach to help that 1/5 of all American families with incomes too small to even meet their basic needs. Our chief weapons in a more pinpointed attack will be better schools and better health and better homes and better training and better job opportunities to help more Americans, especially young Americans, escape from squalor and misery and unemployment roles where other citizens help to carry them.
And now they talk about what about black on black crime as if they didn't make the circumstances for it. But if you're going to compare trained police officers to the people that they call thugs and criminals, I'd rather have my tax money going to them because I know what their problem is. A lot of their problems come from economics. And that's why we got to find a way to keep the tax money within our own community. But you can't do that until you build your own institutions. Right now, they can just debo us and take it out before we even see our money. But if we controlled our own tax money to go into our own communities, not only just for little stuff like fixing the roads, you'll also be able to control your educational system. You'll be able to control how much teachers make. And you can get the best teachers. And we can teach kids how to be doctors and lawyers and how to invest and save and spend and what to do with their money from a young age, how to create business from a young age, how to be successful in life at a young age. Because the school we go to now is made for indoctrination, not education. But at the end of the day, whatever you do build, you have to realize they are going to come eventually. We have to learn how to protect ourselves. That is the one thing we have never been able to do. For as much as they call us violent, we have never been able to protect ourselves. And until we put aside our tribalisms and our belief systems, then we'll never be able to protect ourselves. And we'll never be on the same page.
In case you're just joining us, breaking news today in the 8-month-old case of Justine Damon. Officer Mohammed Noor now faces third-degree murder and second-degree manslaughter charges in her death. As we've all learned in recent years, charges like this against police officers are rare. And as we've learned here in Minnesota last year, convictions rarely come. But we wanted to offer a little more context, so we caught up with the man who has been tracking this issue across the country for more than a decade. When explaining why it took so many months to charge Minneapolis police officer Mohammed Noor in the death of Justine Damon, Hennepin County Attorney Mike Freeman cited the numbers he was up against.
We know from a study by Philip Stinson at Bowling Green State University and the Department of Justice that in the 12 years between 2005 and 2017, there's estimated to be 12,000 police-involved shootings. Of those, only 80 officers were charged with murder or manslaughter.
This case is actually the first instance that I'm aware of this year in 2018 where an officer's been charged in one of these cases.
We spoke to Philip Stinson just before he was name-dropped by Freeman, and he says to date he's now counted 85 officers charged with murder or manslaughter nationwide since 2005, and it's even more rare to see those charges stick. They've resulted in just 32 officers convicted over the same period.
And in the cases where there has been a conviction, exactly half of them have been guilty pleas and half have been jury trials.
Former St. Anthony police officer Geronimo Yanez was the first and only other Minnesota officer to face charges for a fatal on-duty shooting, but a jury acquitted him in the death of Philando Castillo. Stinson says that's common because of the amount of burden on prosecutors.
Not only do they have to prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt in terms of the elements of the crimes that have been charged, they're also going to have to get around this whole issue of whether the officer was legally justified. In other words, I would assume if this goes to trial, the defense will bring up the issue as an affirmative defense that the officer was legally justified because he feared for his life.
Though Mohammed Noor has never spoken to investigators and does not have to testify during his trial, Stinson says based on his research, he likely will.
What we've seen in these cases, when an officer gets on the stand and testifies that they feared for their life and that's why they use deadly force, a judge and a jury, they're just very reluctant to second guess the split-second life or death decisions that officers make in potentially violent street encounters. And we just see that the officers time and time again in that type of situation are not convicted.
Though that would put more pressure on the prosecutor, he says the decision to charge Noor with both third-degree murder and second-degree manslaughter could be an effective strategy, one that has only been tried 3 previous times that he knows of.
It was either reckless behavior resulting in death or it was negligent behavior resulting in death. One of the two. And I think those are going to be easier potentially to prove in court than intentional murder, for example, would be.
What do you think this comes down to?
I've thought about this case for a long time, where a police officer shoots across the front seat of the car where their partner is sitting in the driver's seat. To me, it seems bizarre. So I would think in order to get a conviction in this case, a prosecutor is going to have that other officer who was in the cruiser and or experts who would testify as to whether a reasonable officer would have so perceived the threat.
Now, if there's one thing Phil says he's learned over all this time studying all these cases, is that he does not want to try to predict the outcome of this, because he said juries and cases are all just so different.
Yeah, and he's specifically talking about what people always have to remember is it comes down to how an officer felt in a moment and if her or his life was threatened. And I don't know how this changes if we're talking about feelings.
Well,
how do you disprove a feeling?
And the one, right, but the one thing that the prosecutor I talked to today kept saying is a reasonable officer,
Right.
which is like
that's what the jury has to, they'll hone in on that term, reasonable. But then again, are any of the people in the jury pool officers, so can they say what a reasonable officer does or doesn't with conviction? I don't know.
The Washington Post reports on new evidence schools in the United States are resegregating. Federal data show schools with a high percentage of poor and black or Hispanic students climbed from 9% to 16% between 2000 and 2014. The numbers were released on the anniversary of Brown versus Board of Education. 62 years after that landmark Supreme Court decision, Cleveland, Mississippi faces a new federal court order to integrate. Michelle Miller is in Cleveland with why the school district may appeal. Michelle, good morning.
Good morning. Well, Cleveland school district officials contend they've made big strides since they were ordered to desegregate schools here back in 1969. But a federal judge says it wasn't enough. In fact, the school behind me was built in 1956, and nearly all of the full-time students who walked through its doors have been African American. Cleveland, Mississippi is literally a town divided by old railroad tracks. Most white students live on the west side, while many African American students call the east side home. Deshandra Fields and her brother, Quadidric, attend East Side High School, a well-regarded school where the student body is 100% black. So you think they should not desegregate these schools?
No, ma'am.
Why?
It's this side of the highway versus that side of the highway, and it's been a rival for a long time.
Under the desegregation plan ordered by a federal judge last week, Eastside High School will be merged with Cleveland High School, where 45% of the students are white and 47% are black. A nearly all-black middle school would also be combined with a racially mixed one. Less than a third of the students at the new schools will be white, in a district where nearly half of residents are.
We have kids learning side by side each other of different races.
Jamie Jacks, the school district's attorney, fears the plan will spur a white flight out of public schools.
Unfortunately, when you do a mandatory reassignment plan, the results statistically tell us it's not good in terms of maintaining diversity.
This is not a country that in 2016 wants to be perceived as having deeply segregated communities anymore.
Vanita Gupta heads the Civil Rights Division at the U.S. Department of Justice, which formulated the desegregation plan.
Children deserve to be educated in the kinds of environments that we as adults face, which are mixed race, mixed religion.
Even though Brown versus the Board of Education has been the law of the land since 1954, the Justice Department still has 177 open desegregation cases. Almost half are in just 2 states, Alabama and Mississippi. The Magnolia State has a painful history with desegregation. A deadly riot broke out in 1962 when James Meredith tried to become the first black student enrolled at Ole Miss. Margaret Schwartzweger's kids go to Cleveland High. Edward Duvall's go to Eastside High School.
If the parents would step aside and let the kids feel their way through it, the kids are going to deal with it a lot better than the parents will.
So where do you go from here?
These kids, whether you're black or white, are going to be our leaders for tomorrow, and we need to invest in them. It could work if we wanted to.
Well, the school district says that they believe this ruling will limit options of choice for both parents and students. They also vow to look at all options for appeal. In the meantime, the judge has given both sides 21 days to come up with a new plan for this integration.
50 years ago, Congress passed the Fair Housing Act, but housing discrimination is still a huge problem in this country. According to a recent study, minority borrowers were more likely to be denied a mortgage than similar white borrowers in 61 cities across this country. Now, HUD is responsible for combating housing discrimination. And during your confirmation process, I asked you about your commitment to enforcing laws against housing discrimination, despite whatever personal feelings you had about those laws. And you said at that hearing, quote, "I will follow the law." And I remember hoping that that was true. So, Secretary Carson, it's been a year now. Can you name a few of the things you've done to reduce housing discrimination in your time at HUD?
First of all, we are constantly involved in lawsuits that we have brought against people for housing discrimination.
So are you saying you've initiated many lawsuits over the past year? Is that on discrimination issues? Is that what you're saying?
That is an ongoing process.
So you have initiated how many lawsuits over the last year?
I can't tell you how many. We can certainly get someone to follow up with you on that.
Okay, anything more?
I think that's obviously very important. The way I kind of look at it is when I talk about fair.
I'm sorry, I'm not asking you to get into your description of it. I just want to know what you've done to reduce the specific things you've done to help reduce housing discrimination. And you've said you've initiated many lawsuits, and you'll get back to me on the exact number. And I just want to know other specific things you have done. Anything more?
Well, I would simply say that what we do is to try to create a fair environment for all people and all of our policies. So when we create a fair environment for everybody, that means minorities as well.
That's the question I'm asking, though, is dealing specifically with discrimination, which is the problem. Mr. Secretary, I wanted to give you a chance to make your case, because when I look at your track record at HUD, I just see you headed in the wrong direction. That is, going backwards. Mr. Secretary, a lot of people are criticizing you for spending tens of thousands of dollars in taxpayer money on fancy furniture. And don't get me wrong, I think scamming the taxpayers is a scandal. But the biggest scandal of your tenure is your unwillingness to do your job and enforce the laws that reduce housing discrimination and segregation across this country. Decades of housing discrimination have helped create an enormous wealth gap between white and black families. And the gap between white homeownership rates and black homeownership rates is 30 percentage points larger than it was back in 1968. In 1968, the typical black family had 1/6 as much wealth as the typical white family. Now it is 1/10. We have gone backwards since the civil rights era. It is HUD's job to help end housing discrimination. That's what the law said. You said you would enforce these laws. You haven't, and I think that's the scandal that should get you fired.
Well, I don't think that you have characterized things in any way close to what is accurate, but you're welcome to say whatever you want.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming in the rocket's red glare. The bombs burst
star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave.
All right, and we back on the forecast. Now, our people just have to be aware of what's going on out here. Now, what Trump is doing with this death penalty and this new law is nothing new. This is just an updated version of the black codes. And what Trump is doing and what this Judge Bill Otis is doing is no different from what Hillary Clinton did. No different from Ronald Reagan. No different from LBJ. No different from Richard Nixon or either George Bush. They have always criminalized us. It's just now they feel threatened and they are on the attack. These people are at war right now. These people are making their move right now. And we got to be careful out here. We got to protect ourselves out here. And we got to stop being delusional. We have to wake up and realize the truth. Because once we realize the truth, maybe then we can do something about it. So, as always, man, we have got to start standing for something. Or we're going to keep falling for anything.